Dr. George Barna, thank you so much for joining us here on Higher Ground. A lot of ground to cover on this event today. But I want to start with asking you, because more than anyone else, you have looked at this issue of worldview and where this country stands when it comes to personal faith. If you could give a report card, and I know this is probably a little bit challenging to start with, but if you could give a report card for the nation's faith, where it currently stands, what would that report card say?
It'd probably have to be an incomplete because we're in a situation where so many people are distancing themselves from faith. They're not even thinking about the issue. They're not connecting with God. They're not connecting with churches. They're not connecting with the scriptures. And so it's like, where'd the class go? So, it'd probably wind up being an incomplete. If I had to grade them just based on what we've learned about what people believe and how they're trying to live it out, from a Christian vantage point, it would be an F. But from just a general, I shouldn't say F. I mean, that's not fair. There are a lot of great
A
Christians.
D
Yeah,
minus.
yeah. It's like, come on. I guess if I were an easy grader, this is the days of easy grading. I give a C minus. Okay, but yeah, best I could do.
Well, we're dealing with really, there's two dynamics, right? There's the general faith trajectory of the country as a whole, and then there's the church and Christianity and where Christians are. And I think those two things, obviously, they intersect with one another. But I want to talk about the first, the sort of general sense of Americans leaving Christianity, or people no longer saying they're nominal Christians, at least. Can you take us through some of that and maybe talk about what you think some of those causes might be?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different ways that you can measure that and look at that. If we were to look at self-identification, we go back 50, 55, 60 years, we were at 90% of adults in the nation describing themselves as Christian. Today, we're down in the mid 60s, 65, 67, 68%. So that's a really significant drop in a relatively short period of time. We could look at attendance at Christian churches across the country. Again, you go back, 4, 5, 6 decades, you've got probably roughly 80% of the population who during the course of a month would attend at least one church service. Now we're down to roughly a third. So that's been, cut in more than half over that same period of time. You look at Bible reading, you look at prayer, you look at all the different measures of commitment that we've been studying over that time. Everything is down. There's nothing that's up, apart from, depending on which data you want to look at. I tend to talk about the don'ts. People who don't know if God exists, don't believe that God exists, or don't care if God exists. We're up in the 30 to 40% range now with adults who are in the millennial generation, the Z generation. And of course, that's the majority of the adult population at this point. So, yeah, I mean, it's not a pretty picture. Why has that happened? I think a large part of it goes back to the fact that parents got really busy. And as they were juggling a lot of activities and trying to figure out what mattered most and what was their identity was, I've got to be a success in this culture. And so they invested a lot of time and energy in education and occupation and the other things that related to them making progress in society. At the same time, that meant that they didn't have that much time to raise their kids, but they love their kids.
Mm.
So I had to figure out a strategy for how am I going to deal with this? And the strategy is what I call outsourcing, where what they decided to do is to take that money that they were earning from all that time they were investing in their occupation and hire professionals, experts to help raise their kids. So they'd hire private coaches for their sports. They'd hire private tutors for school. They'd be dropping kids off at churches, letting pastors do the spiritual end of things. And unfortunately, what that's resulted in is that number one, spirituality really gets the short end of the stick. Secondly, when we look at what parents think is important, spiritual development isn't even in the top six. So when
Wow.
when we look at what's happening with our kids, they're being left behind. Why does it matter with kids? Because that's when a person's worldview forms. By the age of 13, it's pretty well complete. And so we have abandoned that aspect of the spiritual development of our children. Society hasn't. So that worldview, you need a worldview to get through the day. So the worldview develops, but it's not having much Christian input.
It's also, you think about the culture we're in right now, how terrifying it is to just say, "Hey, I'm going to drop my kids off with these people and hope that they're going to teach what the Bible actually says." If your goal is to raise children who love the Bible and understand it, we're in such a chaotic culture, you don't even know who you can really trust anymore, even in terms of certain youth groups and organizations that, are no longer maybe where they should be on a lot of the key issues that are important to helping build this sort of worldview up. Not to be redundant here, but we have a question from a parent that I think is important, and it kind of piggybacks off of what you were just saying. So I want to throw it to you. This parent said, "I am very worried about culture and its impact on my kids. What can I do to ensure they grow up loving God and loving others?"
Well, number one, there's nothing you can do that guarantees that's going to happen. We just have to live with that uncertainty. But at the same time, for us to embrace the identity of parent and knowing that when God entrusted children to us, what it means to be a parent is that we're going to invest in raising them up to be a disciple of Jesus. That's a key priority, the key priority for us to keep in mind. And so, as you think about the culture and its impact, one of the things that my research shows is that arts and entertainment media have more impact on the development of a child's worldview than anything else, even more than parents, more than church, more than peers, more than schools. Those are the next four elements in that list, although church actually is not on the list. But when we look at these things, what we discover is that, yeah, so as a parent, if you really care about your child becoming a disciple, recognize number one, disciples make disciples. And the way that they make disciples is by establishing a trust based relationship with whomever they're trying to disciple. And so, if that's going to be your child, what does that mean? You've got to be trustworthy. You can't tell your child one thing and do another. We found that most kids in America today don't trust their parents because that's what's happening. Their parents say, do this, believe this, but then the kids watch their parents and they get a different model from their parents. The parents break their own rules. And so the kids no longer trust them. They turn elsewhere. Where do they turn? They turn to the media. So it's important that you build that relationship, that you invest a lot of time and energy in that relationship, and that there's constant conversation taking place, what I would call Socratic dialogue, where you're not telling a child what to believe all the time, but you're asking them their ideas, their thoughts, what their beliefs are, why, how did they come to that conclusion? How does that square with what the Bible teaches, with what they've experienced in other dimensions of their life, with what they've seen in other people's lives? All those things are critical. And at the same time, you've got to blunt the force of the media in the child's life by, first of all, monitoring their media use, minimizing it, uh, uh, mediating it, that is, talking with them about the content that's being delivered to them, and then modeling the kind of media behavior that you want them to have.
I bet you there are a lot of people right now who are hearing you say what you just said, and they're feeling convicted because of that busyness and that chaos and putting a tablet in front of a kid, or kids just wanting all of that tablet time or phone time now. You've got social media. There are so many things. You think back 10 years ago, we weren't even talking about half of these things. Now, it's a huge part of kids' lives, and some parents don't even realize what their kids are seeing on these tablets and phones. And so I just wanted to kind of focus on that for a minute because as Christians, it would seem, and I would imagine you would agree with this, that we need to be on top of what that material is that these kids are taking in.
Absolutely true. And when I talk about mediating or moralizing the media, what that means is you need to know what they're being exposed to, whether you watch it with them, you watch it before you allow them to watch it, whatever it is, so that you can then discuss it with them. One of the key things here is that you have to realize you're the parent, you're the adult in the room, you're the one who makes the rules. You're the one who's going to answer to God for what happens with the child. So take this really, really seriously and have a plan. Establish the boundaries, uphold the boundaries. That's an important element. And I can already hear a lot of parents saying, oh my gosh, that's going to create so much conflict with my child. Absolutely. And, maybe it's the New Yorker in me, but it's like, get over it. I mean, that's what happens. You're the leader in the family. And I've studied leadership for more than 30 years through our research. One of the things I know about leaders, great leaders, is they do a lot of things, but one of the things they always do is they create conflict. How do they create conflict?
Mhm.
By having a distinct, unique, clear vision in mind and committing themselves to that vision. Now, in the case of a parent, that vision has to be what's God's vision for your child, how you're going to raise them, who they're going to be, what inputs you're going to give them, what you're going to protect them from. That's the vision. And so you have to parent accordingly. And when you do that in relation to technology and media, yeah, your kids are going to moan and groan all day long. Expect it. Feel glad when it happens because you got their attention. And now that you've got that, one of the other things that great leaders do is not only do they create the conflict, but they resolve it. How did they resolve it? By making that vision clear. In this case, helping the child understand why you have those rules in place, what you're expecting the child to become, how that media is corrupting their mind, their heart, and their soul, and their lifestyle. And so putting all that out there for discussion, kids need to understand this. I'm not saying that when you do that, they're going to say, oh, Hosanna, thank you. I didn't know that. I'm willing to live within those boundaries. No, they're not going to do that. But you still have to have your non negotiables. And what you do in terms of screen time is critical. Keep in mind that the average child in America, depending on their age, spends anywhere between 6 to 12 hours a day absorbing media messages. And in my new book, Raising Spiritual Champions, I've got a chapter devoted to some content analysis we did with some of the most popular media that kids are devoting themselves to. And what we discovered is that the biblical worldview is pretty much nowhere to be found in the popular media that they're exposed to. So, what does that mean? Every day they're absorbing messages based on Marxism, postmodernism, secular humanism, moralistic therapeutic deism, Eastern mysticism. Those are the main worldviews that are being tossed into their mind and heart every single day. You are the one who stands between that and them. And so you got to take this seriously. It's a war. So gird up your loins and get on with it.
Yeah, I have an 11-year-old and an 8-year-old, and we have this argument with my 11-year-old about a smartphone. Everybody else has one. She wants one. We're not giving her one, right? And so it's been an ongoing, and as you said, you have that tension and you have to explain it. And we have really good conversations about why. And one day, hopefully, she will appreciate that we held her off from all of these things that other kids are seeing. But, as you were talking about that, we're not here to talk about, Christian entertainment, but it is interesting because there's such a lack of, and it's starting to build. There's more of it, but in particular for kids, there's a lot for little kids. I think about teenagers and young adults. There's really not a lot out there. It almost feels convicting in a sense of, hey, church, do we need to be doing more to serve young people with really good, solid content that helps build worldview? I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but I thought it'd be worth talking about.
Well, I do have a few based on what we found in the studies. And one of those is I went back through the scriptures and I didn't see anywhere where God said, you have a right to be entertained as much as you want. So for us to say that, oh my gosh, we're not producing enough, biblically based material, therefore we're going to have to settle for the secular material. I don't think that's the formula here. I don't think that's even the question that we need to be asking. What we've got to do is be looking at our time, our calling, our gifting, our opportunities, recognizing that our purpose in life is to know, love, and serve God with all our heart, mind, strength, and soul. And if that's the case, and it's also the case that disciples make disciples, then maybe we ought to be thinking about, okay, if I've only got, let's say, 14 hours a day that I'm awake on average, and I've got to work or go to school with whatever other time I have, and even maybe some of that time at work or at school, how can I be making disciples? If that's our mindset, we're not going to be so worried about, there's no good new movies for me to see. There's no good streaming content that I can call up on my phone, at the snap of a finger. Maybe instead what we'd be thinking about is, wow, who should I be praying for? Who can I spend time with today? And be talking about the kinds of issues that might get them to think more about Christ. These are the kinds of things that maybe we need to have a whole different mindset And our concerns about the media are just taken away from our concerns about how we can love God.
That's a really good point, and understanding that life is not all about us, right? As you were just, astutely saying there, I think, yeah. As we're talking about kids here, I want to back up into adults. And actually, one thing you did do it, but I want to actually pause and do this again because worldview is a word we've used a lot in this discussion. It's a word we hear a lot. I think some people on the secular side often they don't like that word. They think it's a Christian word, but it's really not. I mean, everybody has a worldview, but can you define that again for us so we just have a really clear sense so that people understand what we're talking about when you say that word worldview?
Sure. And I get the same thing, because I study this, I write about it, I speak about it, and people's eyes glaze over as soon as I say worldview. So one of the things that I will interchange with that is the notion of a philosophy of life. And most people seem pretty comfortable. Well, of course, I have a philosophy of life. I've thought it through. I know what I believe. I know who I am. Well, that's a worldview. So I mean, that's really what we're talking about is the intellectual, emotional, and spiritual filter that every one of us has that we rely upon for making decisions. It's based on our core beliefs and it results in all of our continual behaviors because you do what you believe. And so, whatever your beliefs are, they get translated into behavior, and that really determines what your worldview is. Essentially, what that worldview does is it answers the big questions about your life. Who am I? Why am I here? How did I get here? What kind of a mark do I want to leave? Do I want to make a difference? How am I going to do that? All of these kinds of questions and many more. So that's what a worldview answers. And that's exactly why it starts forming at 15 to 18 months of age. And it's pretty much fully formed by the age of 13. You're addressing those questions every day as you're growing up. What kind of kid do I want to be? What do I want to be when I grow up? Where do I want to live? Who do I want to be with? Do I want to get married like mom and dad? I mean, all of these kinds of questions are the things that kids are answering. And so they're forming their worldview very young, which is why children are so important in this process.
So I want to throw another parent question to you, and this one's an interesting one because it involves public school. But this parent said, Dr. Barna, I send my daughters to public school and they often discuss evolution and other issues that oppose my Christian perspective in the school. How can I effectively counterbalance that as a parent?
Well, you got to understand, and I went through this in my family, and now my kids are going through it with our grandkids and whatnot. If you're going to send your children to a public school, you're essentially sending them out as missionaries. So you cannot send them out unarmed. They've got to understand what they believe, why they believe it. They need to have the capacity to articulate that to other people because everything that they believe is going to be challenged in the public schools. They may be punished for what they believe in some public schools. And so you've got to prepare your children for that. And you've got to be, looking at, like Jesus said in Luke, count the cost before you build the bridge. And so there's a cost that you've got to look at for sending your kids to public school. Now, you may be thinking, yeah, but I work, I'm busy, I don't know how to teach, I don't have the time to teach. Okay. But your child, probably even more than you, is going to pay the price of winding up in a public school. I'm not saying don't send them there. I'm not saying it's not sometimes a good thing. I'm just saying go in with your eyes open because it's the battle zone. As we raise our children in this culture, that is really the trenches of the spiritual war. Satan knows that if he can win children over, he doesn't have to worry about them as adults because their worldview is pretty much in cement by the age of 13. It'll maybe tinker a little bit, flop around a little bit in the teens, maybe early to mid 20s, but it's mostly formed by 13. So what we do with our children when they're very young, even with schools, look, if you can't homeschool them, there are other schooling options that you can look at. Look at all your options before you make that choice.
Yeah, and as you were saying, equip them if that becomes your choice, making sure that they are prepared. We're and I think the downside of all of this is we're talking about how bad the situation currently is when it comes to worldview, right? Not just among kids, but among parents. And so, you're already at sort of a disadvantage going into it for a lot of people if they are, not in the 2% of parents who have a biblical worldview. And let's talk about that 2% because every time you put research out, I am always stunned. And I don't know why, because we know things are often getting worse when it comes to these metrics. But 2% of parents only having a biblical worldview. What was your reaction when you first sort of saw the results of that, survey wave?
That didn't surprise me because I know that among all adults in America, only 4% have a biblical worldview. So I saw the 2% and said, yeah, that makes sense because they're going to be younger people. Younger people are less likely to have a biblical worldview. But what blows me away is then when I start looking into the segmentation data and we find born again Christian parents where only 8% of them have a biblical worldview. Now that blows my brains out. It's like, oh my gosh, how can this be? Well, it can be because we've so lost sight of what Christianity is about, even in our churches across the country. I mean, we're in a situation where only 37% of all Christian pastors in America have a biblical worldview. Only 12% of children's pastors across the country, 12%, one out of eight, have a
Wow.
biblical worldview. So, I mean, to shake people up, I'll sometimes say, you know what? You're actually putting your child in danger spiritually by taking them to the average Christian church. You've got to be incredibly careful and do a lot of homework before you bring your child to a church. Because if you want them to be doing a lot of the work of helping to build that spiritual foundation for your child, in 7 out of 8 places, they're not going to get a biblical foundation.
Yeah, well, and that's, goes back to what we were saying before. It's, wherever you're sending your kids, you got to really know where they're going to learn these things that you think they're learning, because they could be walking away, just you're solidifying a very negative worldview that you're not intending to solidify. And I want people to be able to grab your book, and you mentioned it before, but the book is Raising Spiritual Champions, and a lot of really useful information here. Why did you choose to write this book?
All right, so we're getting down to it here. So, you take a look at me. I'm getting older. Okay, I don't know how much time I'm going to have left. So, 3, 4, 5 years ago, I sat down and started thinking about how do I finish well? What can I do that's really going to make a difference? If I've only got one more book, 2 more years, 3 more teaching sessions, whatever it is, I want to focus now on what I think is going to make the biggest difference. And as I looked at all the problems facing America and facing our churches, and started pushing everything to the side that was peripheral. I wanted to get to the root cause of everything. It's worldview. Why? Because every decision we make comes from our worldview. We're making bad decisions day after day after day. Why? Because we have the wrong worldview. So we got to change the worldview. And then as I looked at worldview, I thought, wow, how do we go about changing this? Adults typically don't change their worldview, but children is where we have the entree. So that's why I wanted to talk to parents and grandparents and children's pastors, senior pastors as well, because what I try to tell them is, you know what? You're wasting your time for the most part with adults. I hate to say that. You hate to hear it more, but it's the truth of the matter. I've been studying this for almost 45 years now. And I can tell you that adults don't change. Okay. But the ones who do change are the ones under the age of 13. And so I'd encourage every church to put most of their resources into working with children. And what they need to do with parents is to do everything they can to work with the parents. It's the parents' job biblically to disciple the children, not the church's job. And so the church has the job of coming alongside the parents, resourcing them, helping them, encouraging them, doing what they can to help out there. But that's why this book came out, is because I said we've got to understand how discipleship works with children and help parents in that process, and maybe even encourage churches along the way to help the parents in that process.
So I have a little bit of a unique question here that I wasn't even thinking about until we started talking here, and a couple of the comments you just made. Watching these spiritual moments that seem to be unfolding, and they're all anecdotal moments, right? You've got 4,500 people getting baptized on a beach. You've got churches. Some churches are reporting that they're having, and a lot of these are young people, which is what's so interesting, but they're having a resurgence. They're doing the most baptisms they've ever done, some of these churches. It's interesting to me that while all these numbers are happening, you have these pockets at the same time. And I would love to get your reaction to what you think might be going on there.
Well, I mean, I tend to look at all of this in terms of recognizing that this is all part of the bigger spiritual war. So there are different battles being fought on many different fronts. And Christians are losing some of those battles right now. We're winning some of those battles right now. And I think that the important thing for anybody who's watching or listening is to be thinking about, what battles am I fighting for the Lord right now? What war front has He called me to? How do I need to be prepared to be His representative, His agent of transformation, His agent of love, His disciple maker in that particular front? And to be prepared for that. Again, it goes back to, count the cost, know what you're getting into, be ready for it, and do it as well as you can do it. So I'm always encouraged when I see the Lord doing those kinds of things in different battle fronts. But I think we also have to keep in mind the larger war that's taking place. We know ultimately God's going to win it. There's no doubt about that. That's a done deal. But getting to that point, there are going to be some casualties. I don't want to be a casualty. I don't want my family, my grandkids to be casualties. I don't want my friends and their families. So I've got to do what I can to be fighting the good fight every day, just like Paul encouraged us to do.
I love that. All right, final question for you. You've been researching this all for a very long time, and you gave some great tips today, great information for parents and families and grandparents. How do you not get discouraged? Again, you've been tracking this, so you've been seeing where it's going for a long time. What keeps you moving and going on that front?
I think a lot of it comes down to, and by the way, I've had periods of time where I was very discouraged, very depressed, in fact, looking at some of this stuff and saying, oh my gosh, if I think strategically about how we turn this around, what a mess, what a conundrum we've got. But I think what the Lord has done for me is to help me recognize, look, it's not in your hands, it's in my hands. And, I'm not asking you to win the war. I've already won the war. I'm just asking you to be a faithful soldier. And so I called you to do this aspect of ministry, research, teaching, writing, speaking, all that. And all I'm asking you to do is be faithful to what I've called and gifted you to do. And if you do that, don't worry, I'll take care of the rest. And it may not look the way that you want it to look, but it's going to work out. You know that. You've read the book. You read the final page. You know I win. You know that you can be part of that. You are part of that. And so just do what I've asked you to do. And one of the things that I teach people as part of the biblical worldview is the definition of success is consistent obedience to God. It's not how much money you make, how many books you sell, what kind of house you live in, who you know, who you don't know. What matters is every day when I wake up, am I on my knees asking God to forgive me for being such a schlub and then giving me the grace to have one more day to try to get it right for Him, to try to use those gifts and resources He's entrusted to me for His purposes to advance His kingdom. And for me, that means being a truth teller. Go out, find the truth, tell people about it. Yes, they're going to say mean things about me. Okay. I know my Father in heaven loves me. That's what I got to focus on.
Well, that is an incredible place to close and a great message for everybody. It is not about us, it is about something bigger. And I want people to go out, grab your book. It's Raising Spiritual Champions, Nourishing Your Child's Heart, Mind, and Soul. If people want to continue this investigation, exploration of how they can build biblical worldview in their kids, that is a great book. Dr. Barna, appreciate you joining us today on Higher Ground.
Thanks so much, Billy. It's been good to be with you.